Hello everybody. So I'm going to do part 3 today. So this is of Amber Heard's appeal, and I'm going to be looking at starting with the 4 that Andrea Burkhart said that they were focused on. That was her analysis, that was her belief. Of course they do have 16. Maybe I'll get through all 16. I'm at least going to do the first 4. And this third one, I'm going to just give you a heads up, I'm not going to give a 0 for this. So the first 2 I gave effectively 0. This is for the UK case and for the transference to California. Also, sort of another factor that I didn't think of when I was first doing the California one is that actually if it went to California now and they've already had discovery, they would still lose in California, because the benefit of her going to California would be that they don't mandate discovery if it's held there, but since discovery's already happened, she would still lose there, so there'd be zero chance of, well, zero purpose going there even. It wouldn't even help her, she wouldn't win, even if they did for some reason do a retrial there. So the third one I'm going to be looking at, and this is a non-zero. The fourth one is going to be a non-zero as well. But the third one is going to be about medical records. This is not a 0. There is some chance that this is working. I know Amber Heard fans are going to get excited about that, but wait until you hear what I say as for the chances, because it's not going to be very high. So let's start off. So what do we mean by medical records? When we're dealing with a domestic violence case, ordinarily what happens is that you have physical assault, which is usually recorded by doctors, and you will usually have a lot of medical records about it. Now, it might not be reported at the time because they might be excuses, and you might then go back and say, well, actually, when I hit my head on the door or I fell over, that was actually domestic violence. And you would be then looking through that and corroborating that to see who actually caused it. Because, of course, just because there are medical records and there is proof of violence doesn't mean that the accused is the perpetrator, because there could be other people that did it or other reasons for it. You can get injuries from other reasons besides your husband hitting you. So that has to be corroborated in other ways. And what I needed to highlight here, and unfortunately we do get this belief in the media that women never lie, people who are accused of things are always guilty. Now that's not true. In any form of crime we have around about 50-50. If we didn't have 50-50, there'd be no point ever having defence lawyers. So, from my experience, domestic violence usually is found guilty about 55% of the time, found not guilty about 45% of the time. So when you're looking at the 45% of the time, what you would look at, you have to have a motive to lie, obviously. For anything to be false in any form of criminal law, you have to have a motive to lie. If you have no motive to lie, well, why are you even looking at it? So the motive to lie is often financial gain. In this case, we definitely have that. Amber Heard gained a lot of money. In fact, from what I've read, is 32 million that she gained from the divorce proceedings. And she also gained a lot in public image, future earnings, all sorts of things there. Definitely a massive motive to lie. And so if there was no motive to lie, you couldn't have a defence. It just wouldn't happen. So second thing is that we would normally have these medical records, and then you would have to have somebody confirm, oh yes, this was a result of when they were hit and all that sort of stuff. You could still win without having that confirmation, but certainly in what cases I've worked at, which is around 178 cases, and I worked at it supporting lawyers, so I'm not as a lawyer but supporting lawyers. I didn't work on any where there were no physical injuries, and this is whether they were found guilty or not guilty. Never worked on any that didn't have physical injuries. Now, perhaps it's different in USA, but certainly here in Australia, they don't even get to court if there's no physical injuries. Now, in theory, it can still be proven, but I was not involved in any that didn't have physical injuries. Now, that doesn't mean, again, the physical injuries don't mean that this person did it. And what we find in the ones that were found not guilty, in other words, that didn't happen, was, well, the most common one was that the woman would hit herself. And what I mean by hit herself, the most common way that she'd hit herself is that she would hit herself against cabinets, against car doors, she'd fall over and all that sort of thing. The easy way to prove this would be if you had video footage. You could also do it if you had witnesses. Now, if we apply that to Amber Heard's situation, this Johnny Depp was staying in the East Columbia building, which is heavily monitored with security guards galore, and I believe that they had a reasonable amount of video surveillance. Now, that means that if she did hit herself into a kitchen cabinet, you would have reasonable quality video footage of that event, and you would then also have witnesses, people supporting it and saying, hey, she actually hit herself. So in this situation, I would be surprised to find that she would make this up, and therefore if she did say that there was physical violence and had proof of physical injuries, I would expect that it was true. So that's possibly why she didn't do it, because she would be proven. If she had falsified physical injuries, she would prove it. The other thing is, the second way that it would often be done is by getting somebody else to hit you. Now, some people would hit themselves, but if you didn't, then you would often get a brother or sister, usually wouldn't go further away from that in your relatives, but you might also get a new boyfriend. And in Amber Heard's case, I would imagine that the most likely candidate would be her sister, Whitney Henriquez. And if Whitney was living in the East Columbia building, again, that would be witnessed. You would see Whitney hitting Amber, suddenly producing a bruise, it wasn't caused by Johnny, and she would be found out. So, if she had medical records of this kind, again, this does not prove that Johnny Depp did it. And given that there's no corroboration whatsoever, and there's a lot of corroboration saying it didn't happen and went the other way, and she had inconsistent statements, it really wouldn't make much of a chance of success. So if she did have this, what would be the chance that it would actually affect the outcome? And you're probably looking, I'm going to say, about 50-1, about 2%. It would still affect the outcome a little bit. Might be enough to change an almost guilty to a guilty. But were we on the almost guilty? I don't think we were there. So then we need to look at what it was with what we actually had, which were a few photographs, that not very many of them, most of them not showing real injury but showing what looked like makeup, and then having her report to a psychologist. Now, she already had all the photos admitted, so that's not an issue, but reporting to the psychologist. Now, again, would this make any difference? And I think we have to reason that most jury members would look at physical injuries ahead of just talking to a psychiatrist. And again, I've never heard of a case being found, not even getting to court, if they claimed physical injuries but only had reports to a psychologist or psychiatrist. I've never heard of that even being heard. That would be dropped, it wouldn't even get to court, because it's so ridiculous to say that, because you would have physical injuries. Now, you might have physical injuries that were brushed off as something else at some other stage, but you might have a doctor's report saying, oh yes, this is when they said they were hit, they ran into the door, this is when they said they fell over, so forth. But you'd still have physical injuries, because you can't, the kind of injuries that you'd have are not the kinds of things that you can just cover up with makeup and they heal by themselves. In fact, putting makeup on them is pretty awful. Now, I have seen on YouTube people have shown that you can use makeup to cover up bruises, but whether she did that is doesn't look like it, and there's no corroborating evidence that she did do that. So would these psychological things of her, and we pretty much know what they were her saying to people years afterwards that, yeah, she was hit by Johnny, and went into a little bit of detail, but then these weren't really necessarily consistent. Would they help a jury make the decision? A little bit. And if we say that it's 2% if it's actual physical injuries, talking about physical injuries is probably a lot less than that. And I'm going to say it's about 10 times less, so about 0.2%, or 500 to 1. But then we have to get to the case of convincing judges. And I'm going to say judges really are not going to bother with such a minor thing. Why? Because they'd have to issue a whole new trial just on that off chance that a jury might be a little bit more convinced because of this. And of course then they have to say, well, is it worth it? Is it something substantially different? But there is a chance. Now, I don't think that she would win a trial if this was allowed in, but there is some chance that they would say, well, actually, she didn't get the full lot in there, only got a little bit. So I'm putting that at 0.02%, so that's about 5,000 to 1. It is a chance. it is better than her chances for the UK trial or the changing the venue. That's it from me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Bye bye now.